The betrayal that set me free. For 42 years, I believed I understood love, loyalty, and family. I was wrong. My name is Daniel, and 7 years ago, my entire world collapsed in a way I never saw coming. I had what most people would call a perfect life, an accomplished career as an architect, a beautiful home that I designed myself, and a wife, Laura, whom I adored with every fiber of my being. And then there was my older brother, Javier, the golden child, my father's pride and joy. Growing up, I lived in Javier's shadow. Our mother died when I was 8, leaving us to be raised by our strict, overbearing father. He made it clear who his favorite was. Learn from your brother, he'd say. Why can't you be more like Javier? No matter what I achieved, it was never enough. Still, I admired my brother, craved his approval, and believed he had my back. That belief cost me everything. Laura and I met in university. She was studying interior design, and we clicked instantly. At least I thought we did. 3 years later, we married. I stood at the altar, thinking I was the luckiest man alive, completely unaware that the man standing beside me as my best man would one day destroy everything I held dear. For 5 years, Laura and I built a life together. We launched an architecture and design studio, turned our house into a home, and dreamed of starting a family. Meanwhile, Javier bounced between failed marriages and business ventures, always cushioned by my father's endless support. Looking back, I see the signs, the hushed phone calls, the stolen glances, the way Laura would abruptly hang up when I walked into the room. But I was too busy, too trusting, too blind. And then, on our anniversary, I came home early to surprise Laura. Instead, I was the one surprised. I opened our bedroom door and froze. There, tangled in the sheets of the bed we had chosen together, were my wife and my brother. My vision blurred. My heart pounded. The air was sucked from my lungs. Laura gasped, pulling the sheets around her. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered. But Javier? He didn't even flinch. He just smirked and said, "You've always had what I deserved. Now I have what really matters." His words cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I stormed out, my world in pieces. But the worst part wasn't over. When my father found out, I expected anger, support, at the very least, acknowledgement of the betrayal. Instead, he shrugged and said, "These things happen." As if I had lost a game, not my wife and my trust in my own family. Then came the final knife to the gut. Maybe if you had paid more attention to your wife, she wouldn't have strayed. I was done. The divorce was quick and merciless. Javier and Laura, now a team, fought dirty. She walked away with 60% of our business. Our business. I could have fought harder, but I was drained. I left her the house too, just to rid myself of the ghosts that haunted it. But the worst pain wasn't losing Laura. It was realizing my own family had chosen Javier. My father even gifted them a house as a wedding present when they married just months later. So I vanished. I packed what little I had left and moved to a city where no one knew my name. For a year I was a ghost, barely surviving. I worked a job far beneath my skills, drank myself to sleep, and ignored every call. The world outside felt like a threat. The only person who didn't give up on me was my younger sister, Elena. She called every week. At first I ignored her. Then I picked up but barely spoke. Slowly our conversations grew longer. One day she gave me something that changed everything. A letter from our mother written before she died. In it she told me I was special. That I had a gift for seeing beauty where others couldn't. That no matter what my father said, she was proud of me. For the first time since the betrayal, I cried. Something inside me shifted. I clawed my way out of the darkness. I started therapy, built my own architecture firm, and poured my pain into my work. One project led to another, and soon my name was back on the map. And somewhere along the way I met Sophia. She was nothing like Laura. Strong, independent, fiercely intelligent. She had her own scars, a divorce, a teenage son, years of struggle. We built something new, something honest. No games, no secrets, just two broken people helping each other heal. Then life threw one last twist my way. 3 weeks ago, after 7 years of silence, Javier showed up at my door. He looked older, worn down, desperate. His once arrogant posture was gone. His life, his so-called great love story, was crumbling. The business was failing. My father's money could no longer save him. Laura, the woman he betrayed me for, was on the verge of leaving him. And for the first time I saw it. Javier wasn't the winner. He never was. I was. Not because I got revenge. Not because I watched him suffer. But because I had finally, truly moved on. I looked him in the eye and simply said, "You made your choice. Now live with it." Then I closed the door. And for the first time in years I felt free. 7 years had passed. 7 years since I walked away from my past, from my family, from the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. Now I had built something new. Something real. My architecture studio had grown beyond what I ever imagined, with a team of talented young architects who shared my vision. My book on sustainable design was receiving praise in the industry. Sophia and I had talked about marriage, though we both knew that what we had didn't need a legal document to prove its strength. As for my father and Javier, I only heard updates through my sister, Elena. My father's health had worsened, but stubborn as ever, he refused to change his ways. Javier and Laura had twins, a boy and a girl. But their perfect family life? Nothing but a facade. Their business was struggling. Rumors swirled about their financial problems. Their fairy tale marriage, it seemed, was cracking under the weight of reality. I had no desire to reach out. I had found peace in my distance. Until 3 weeks ago. That Saturday, Sophia had gone to visit her son at university, leaving me home alone. I spent the morning working on plans for a cultural center, deeply immersed in the fusion of traditional Valencian elements with avant-garde design. I was lost in my work when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. My team knew better than to interrupt my weekends, and my friends always called first. I opened the door absent-mindedly, only to freeze. Javier. 7 years had changed him. The sharp, confident man I once knew had softened around the edges, lines deeper on his face, gray streaks in his dark hair. He had gained weight, yet he still clung to his old image, an expensive suit, a flashy Rolex. The kind of things he always used to mask his reality. He gave me that same smug smile I remembered all too well. Danny, he said. No one had called me that in years. Aren't you going to invite your big brother in? For a second, I considered slamming the door in his face. But curiosity won. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Javier walked in as if he owned the place, his eyes scanning my home, judging every detail. He strolled straight to the living room overlooking the sea and let out a low whistle. Well, little brother, you've done well for yourself. Nice house. I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. What do you want, Javier? He smirked. Is this how you greet family after all these years? No drink? No catching up? He sank into my sofa like he belonged there. I sighed, went to the kitchen and returned with 2 beers. He took his, examining the label before taking a sip. Your architecture award made waves in Madrid, he said casually. Even Dad cut out the newspaper article. Won't admit it, but I think he was proud. A flicker of something stirred in me at that. Not that I cared. Not anymore. I don't care what Dad thinks, I said evenly. Now tell me why you're here. Javier leaned back, taking another sip. Laura and I had twins, you know. A boy and a girl. Daniel and Daniela. The names hit like a slap. A sick joke. Javier must have seen my reaction because he chuckled. Laura's idea. Said she always respected you as an architect. Thought the kids should have a name tied to talent. Bullshit. That woman had betrayed me with my own brother, and now she wanted to name her children after me? The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Javier, I doubt you came all the way to Valencia just to show me pictures of your kids. Get to the point. His smile faltered. The mask slipped. All right, fine. I'll be direct too. He set down his beer and leaned forward. Things haven't been going well in Madrid. The studio's struggling. Temporary setbacks, you know how it is. Market's tough, clients are demanding, competition is fierce. There it was. The real reason for his visit. Financial problems? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He sighed. Dad's been helping, but with his health issues, doctors say he needs to cut back on stress. So I was thinking, maybe you could help us out. Just a small loan. Enough to keep us afloat until things turn around. I stared at him, then let out a short, humorless laugh. You're really sitting here after everything asking me for money? Javier didn't even blink. We're family, Danny. His tone was almost pleading, but his eyes, calculating as ever. Family? The word tasted bitter. Where was family when you betrayed me? Where was it when Dad took your side? Where was it when you had children and named them after me? Why? To keep me in your shadow even in your own home? Javier stood abruptly, annoyed. I knew you'd be like this. It's been 7 years. People make mistakes. I stood too, anger simmering beneath my calm exterior. A mistake is forgetting an appointment. Sending an email to the wrong person. What you did. That was a choice. Javier's jaw tightened. Laura and I fell in love, okay? It wasn't planned. These things happen. And showing up now, after 7 years, to rub your life in my face, that just happens too, huh? His lips curled into a bitter smile. You always were the smart one in the family. But you lacked emotional intelligence. You never saw Laura and me coming. The words hit like a gut punch. But I refused to let him see it. I exhaled slowly. And you always lacked common sense if you thought I'd ever give you a cent. Javier grabbed his jacket, eyes flashing with anger. Dad was right about you. Always selfish. Always petty. I raised a brow. Dad said that? Interesting, considering I've been paying for his medical treatments for the last 3 years. Javier's face changed instantly. For the first time since he walked through my door, I saw genuine shock. What are you talking about? He asked, voice quieter now. I grabbed my keys from the counter. Come on, Javier. You're about to have a real conversation with Dad. Unless, of course, you'd rather keep living in your fantasy where you're the golden son and I'm the failure. Javier hesitated, the weight of my words sinking in. For a brief moment I saw the boy he used to be, the brother I once trusted before greed and betrayal changed him. Let's go, he finally muttered. I need to hear it from him. And just like that, for the first time in 7 years, my brother and I walked side by side toward a truth he wasn't ready for. The car ride to my father's house was the quietest and tensest I had ever shared with Javier. Not even when we were children and fought had we maintained a silence so charged with emotion. I parked in front of the modest house where my father now lived. Nothing like the mansion where we grew up. But it was comfortable, a single-story home adapted for his medical needs. Javier looked at the small dwelling in confusion. What happened to the family house? It was sold 2 years ago to pay off debts and finance his treatment, I replied as I took out the keys. This one is more practical for him now. No stairs, adapted bathrooms. Upon entering, we were greeted by Carmen, the evening nurse. Hello, Daniel. I didn't expect you so early, she said with a kind smile. Then she looked at Javier curiously. This is your brother? Your father has told me about you. Yes, this is Javier, I said, noticing how my brother shifted uncomfortably under Carmen's appraising gaze. Don Ernesto is in the living room. He's been very lucid today. He even remembered to ask me about my grandson, Carmen said as she picked up her bag. I'm leaving now. The evening medication is prepared in the kitchen as always. After Carmen left, I led Javier to the living room. Our father sat in his recliner, reading the newspaper with his glasses perched on his nose. When he saw us, his face lit up. Daniel, I didn't expect you until later. His gaze fell on Javier and for a moment he looked confused. Then he smiled, but I noticed a certain reserve in his expression. Javier. What a surprise. What brings you here? Are the children with you? No, Dad. Just me, Javier replied, his voice strangely timid. I came to talk to you. My father looked at us both and I knew he had picked up on the tension. I suppose you've been talking to your brother? He said, carefully folding the newspaper and setting it aside. Sit down. Both of you. We sat across from him as we had when we were children and he called us in to scold us. The irony did not escape me. Have you told him everything? My father asked, looking directly at me. Only what was necessary, I replied. About the company, your health, the will. My father nodded slowly. He looked much older than I remembered, but his eyes retained that sharpness that had always defined him. Javier, I suppose you have questions, he finally said. Why? My brother's voice sounded choked. Why didn't you tell me anything? About the company, about your health? Why did you go to Daniel and not to me? My father sighed deeply as if he had been waiting for this conversation for years. Because Daniel asked me, he said simply. The weight of those words hung in the air. Daniel called every week asking how I was, how the projects were going. You only called when you needed money. That's not fair, Javier protested. I was busy with my family, with my life. And you think Daniel wasn't? My father leaned forward. Daniel rebuilt his life from scratch after what you and Laura did to him. He created his own business, formed new relationships, and still found time to call me. To visit me. Javier remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. When the company started having problems, I thought about asking you for help, my father continued. But Martinez showed me the accounting books. I discovered that you had been taking money for years, signing loans in my name that you never paid back. They were investments, Javier murmured defensively. I was going to pay it all back with interest. With what? The money from your failed projects? Or the money from the casinos, where Laura saw you lose thousands in one night? This revelation surprised me. I hadn't known that Laura had spoken to my father. Laura told you that? Javier asked, paling. She comes to see me sometimes, my father admitted, to our shared surprise. She's worried about you. About the children. She says you've been unstable lately. Javier stood up abruptly. This is a conspiracy. First Daniel, now you. Even Laura. Everyone is against me. Sit down, Javier. My father's voice took on that tone of authority I remembered from childhood. Surprisingly, Javier obeyed. No one is against you, my father continued. This is about consequences. Javier repeated the word bitterly. Consequences? What about his consequences? He pointed at me. He disappeared for years. Abandoned us. Where was he when Mom died? When you had your first heart attack? He was exactly where you and I put him, my father replied, his voice laced with sadness. We drove him away. Me by always taking your side. You by stealing his wife. What did you expect him to do? Stay and endure our betrayal with a smile? The silence that followed was deafening. I had never heard my father speak like that. And yet he continued. When he found out I was in trouble, he came. Without questions, without recriminations, he just came. He paid my debts, saved what was left of the company, got me the best doctors. A lump formed in my throat. I had never sought my father's recognition for what I had done. Javier exhaled shakily. You're disinheriting me. I didn't disinherit you, my father corrected. I reorganized my assets. Half of what is left will go into a trust for your children, my grandchildren, which they will only be able to touch when they turn 25. The other half is for Daniel to compensate for what he spent on me these past years. Javier's voice turned almost pleading. But I'm your son too. You always will be, my father assured him. But Daniel needs my support now more than you do. Besides, he added with a small smile, I already gave you your inheritance in advance. All those loans, all those gifts, Javier, I have given you more money than I will ever have left to pass down. Another silence. This time it wasn't deafening, it was final. Javier looked at me, then at our father. His shoulders slumped in defeat. My father turned to me. I want you to come to dinner once a month. With all of us. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. Dad, I don't think. I'm not saying you have to forgive, he interrupted gently. Just try to understand. Life is too short to hold on to resentment. I don't know if I will ever completely forgive Laura or Javier. There are wounds that leave permanent scars. But I have learned that the best revenge is not to see those who hurt you suffer. It is to rebuild your life in such a way that their betrayal becomes a mere chapter in your story, not your entire narrative. Life teaches us that forgiveness is not about forgetting, nor is it about excusing those who have wronged us. It is about freeing ourselves from the chains of resentment and moving forward with dignity. Betrayal cuts deep, especially when it comes from family. But as this story shows, the best revenge is not to see those who hurt you suffer. It is to rebuild your life so beautifully that their actions become nothing more than a chapter in your story, not your entire narrative. Takeaway: never let betrayal define your future. Choose growth over grudges. Success, peace, and self-respect are the real victories. Did this story resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. We'd love to hear your experiences and perspectives. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to show your love and support. Your engagement helps us bring more valuable content to you.